Itself. While we all agree the goal of universalizing ethics, on the other side, critics note that such universal measures typically this moment that education matters, and what we do really matters more than ever. We clearly need to have more conversations across these different and we need to uphold the values of inclusion
of projects and programs and activities and culture through lots of ways, and thinking about design and methods and perspective matters and context matters and all of this. And to think deeply about not just the individual pieces of our perspectives, but the collective perspective and the collective power, because you understand what is right and what is.
It means that you either donate it to your university library where it will exist forever for future generations to read, or if you really don't want it, then you give it back to Iveta or Gustavo to find good homes for. But this is the book which it's called 6 Decades of CIES. It was produced for the discussions and the debates.
The first session of the symposium will set the stage for this debate and for the following debates as well by focusing on the different rationales and different actors behind the development of global learning metrics. For the purposes of this conversation, we will define metrics fairly broadly to include both global indicators of learning and the various measurements used to assess learning. And these measurements may happen at different levels. They may happen at the classroom, the national levels, the international levels. So the first question that I would like to ask the panelists is, what is the value added at the other levels of the education, the end goals of the group?
Thank you for the question, and actually that has a mandate to come and to produce a globally comparable indicator for that is a commitment that the country has at the national level, the conceptual issues that are behind the discussion on the contents, what are those minimum levels, what is developmentally on track. So we need to actually to have this conversation because already the presidents of the world have decided that these are the indicators that we need to come. And these indicators mean that we're going to compare countries that is over space, and then we're going to compare during 15 years those countries and how we're going to track and to monitor. That is not my area. I have just to collect the data and to agree on this one. But someone will pick that one, and we know at the same time that if we don't come with those disagreement and trying to agree on common parameters, information about countries is going to be filling into the tables, and actually we need to have fair comparison. We need to address issues of equity, issues of power. So we really need to have a conceptual framework to what refers. If not, it's going to be unfair, the comparison in all these two dimensions. And I think that that's difficult to understand that we have to reduce in some cases to one parameter the discussion. The situation demands to come with this kind of sum of compromises and solve the measures, and to agree that there are 38 million children out of school, none of whom would be touched by a learning metric that's school-based. We haven't had an appropriate conversation about a school-based metric. We need to have metrics that will actually allow, and if we don't follow that hierarchy of needs, then we'll do more harm than good.
Now and save the world and so forth.
And I think there's some people in this room like Doug Williams who have written about this, that global metrics can allow us to target resources where there is the most inequality and the most need, right? So there's another inflection. Metrics are not only about driving performance and lowest common denominator kinds of inputs, but they also are about really helping a global community to target additional resources to the countries most in need, to the populations most in need, and I think those pieces are so important. And they've, in fact, I think some of the metrics they have been used very judiciously. But even PISA, I think the broader narrative that comes out of the PISA studies is actually, if you invest early, invest in quality, invest in equity, target populations that are left out, you actually end up with a better stock of human capital. You end up with Eric's outcome. So I like to think about it more in that inflection rather than as simply a global political economy in which we're all racing to the bottom, in fact.
And then I will go to actually to build a little bit on what has been said as well in terms of the countries and their commitments. So as we have to work with countries in collecting the data, actually this kind of mandate, it looks like that the president has committed, has been interpreted by the countries as a kind of an obligation because we are in charge of data collection, and actually the countries are searching for capacity building and trying to build towards actually getting this data. And in terms of that, this is, I think, the main message, and for this reason I insist on the fact of agreeing on the common contents of what is minimum, and actually having this dialogue to actually to have at the country level also a better quality of data for them to take better decisions, to allocate better resources. And at the same time, these SDGs are allowing us to collect data on this equity dimension that actually Karen was mentioning about this market parents have a right. We know that civil society is also involved.
And with no realization that there are orders of magnitude less learning going on in Latin America than in Europe or other places or in East Asia, and that these are important. And so what the global having a global metric does is allow you to link what's going on in countries to what's possible. Under the international test, the PISA tells you basically what's possible. It doesn't tell you how to do it. There's some technical issues that Silvia brings up and so forth of how you get from an international metric, call it PISA if you want or whatever, how do you get that to something that's useful to individual countries to make decisions?
Because I think that the key word here is harmonization, and actually the fact that you have different metrics and actually the technical work is actually doable. We have already for the first points of mention and the work of harmonizing national and international and regional assessment. So I mean that we don't need to go to health. Factory harmonizing, I think the issue here is to act is doable. Actually, with South-Pins or any other curriculum, they need to work as a technical solution, not only one, but many. Harmonization is the issue. The fact is,
One of the questions is that many of the advanced countries achieved economic development, sound economic development, even without PISA or without global learning metrics. And then the question is, why do we need global learning metrics at this particular moment? Why now?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I would answer very simply that we know that among the developed countries, there are vastly different growth rates of nations that determine what the economic well-being of the nation will be in the next 25 to 50 years. They're vastly different. So that, I'll give you an example. 1960 and 2000, Korea grew at % per year, grew at 1%. At the end of that period, the citizens of Korea were 10 times better off than they were in 1960, and the citizens of New Zealand were 2.5 times better off. That's the kind of difference that it makes, and that these differences are directly related, as far as we can tell, to what I would call the knowledge capital of nations, the skill levels of nations. And that's why, yes, it's important to know how do we get there and so forth, but it's also important to know what's possible and what it means to have to change.
I mean, posse's out there. Country are trying to, the work that Hargreaves and you and others have done. I mean, no single country has ever gone up in the rankings by trying to go up in the rankings. By ignoring them, you seem to be able to do better.
Let's be serious. Lots of other nations in the world have tried to move, and it's not
important when it comes to driving a global agenda. And so to me, that's, in prioritization, we should look at not so much to governments and teachers, but to the international community.
Make some presentations at the next UN General Assembly. I doubt it, but certainly maybe which is different. Your philosophy, your ideology is very much present there. If I believe in assessments that are going to make real-time so that we can control something and get snapshots, versus if we're building capacity who are with students, that's a very different conversation than after 3 years of consultation and development. We want 10. We kept fighting it. And so at the very end, we have a recommendation that, the international community of nice, influential people, and gave them to the outgoing Secretary General of the UN, that, we don't actually adopt that or restrict ourselves with that. And we don't confuse an advocacy approach with an actual sort of tracking, monitoring, funding, resourcing approach. I think those are two completely different things. I understand you have the tensions, we have to do both, but I think about, the monopolies in the testing industry that could actually do the test, create the textbooks, advise the governments on what to do. They also can aggregate the data. They're also, able to take student data, right, and sell it, and have to look at very carefully at the privacy terms of that data and how that families for loans or for other kinds of things. And if I can add one last thing, with the financing, so it'll be 50 seconds, I can do it easy. The issue of domestic financing, right? The untold story of the last GPE replenishment, right, where they just blew away all the donors, right? Now, I don't know in terms of if you look accountability on those pledges and what actually came out, but I think some of it it's worth looking at. And I think if we are seeing a world where USAID goes away, where DFID goes away, I think that's real. I think we need to kind of brace ourselves to thinking about that or come back in a different form. You know, I think it's real. I do. It goes away in the way that they are now. How about that? Can I do that? Okay. Make you all more comfortable because I know how contracting works. But the issue of where I'm going to focus, where EI's focusing, is going to be on taxation at national level. That's where we see the sustainability for funding for achieving the whole package of the SDGs. And we know we're going to need donors, but we have to have the focus there. Otherwise, it's just going to be continuously coming back over and over again, trying to get to kind of find another bumper sticker or another argument to try to see if we can please get this one prime minister to care his wife long enough to make a pledge. That's not sustainable, and we're not going to buy it. That was my last bit.
I hope that the FIT stays and GP and the other
they won't stay in the form they are now.
But anyway, in terms of mandate, and actually trying to take on your observation, is part of the mandate is just to inform the people who are in the position at UNESCO and the UN about the discussion that are happening, because some other players are informing that this, so in that sense, is the obligation. These are part, so hopefully nobody will come with any other idea, because I have enough work to actually to take on some of the things that are actually proposed in this moment. So I am really praying for this list of indicators to be closed next week in Geneva in the next discussion of the IG. But I think that the rest is a valid discussion about the other players that are there, and I agree that countries need to mobilize, but anyway, I think that we are improving also the statistics on finances, so hopefully we're going to have better information there.
Yeah. Let's hope.
I just want to say that, one of the big challenges is data in every direction, and so just congratulations, because with UIS extra effort, I think we've now actually got more countries, low-income countries, very poor countries, and then just because David, but also just the across low-income trend. But certainly overall in net, they're putting.
That's part of this discussion, frankly. This discussion about how to research, to the extent that evidence.
It's a kind of not, well,
this thing that happens, everything that it's of such importance. Every newspaper, I mean, they have these trainings on how media covers PISA, right? They have and what do they cover? Let's talk about how do they array the data, right? Are they interested in the tomes of contextual data? Are they interested in the questionnaire information? Are they interested in all this stuff? No, they only care about that top table. And if that's not high, I think that's very high stakes.
But when you say high stakes, it usually implies that somebody is going to gain or lose a lot by this, and I don't see.
In Japan, didn't the government there was a flip in government because they went down on the PISA? I mean, there's a book called Uses and Misuses of PISA, and they understood what would go down when it didn't actually positive history. The Council of Ministers, they say that wasn't the PISA shock.
And that I wanted to out loud, because my understanding of the state of play, certainly within GP partner countries, is that there's been no conversation about using PISA as a learning metric. There has been a great deal of conversation about trying to extend the use of some of the regional metrics like PASEC and SACMEC and so on, and potentially linking. It's certain efficiency. You hire one company to. That's not one of the
is looking up to possible measures that could be used to indicators, right? And PISA definitely is mentioned as one
of many. But no, there's no. I mean, it'd be really funny if, first of all, just I could actually turn to Silvia and say, Silvia, do you have a sufficient budget even to design the link across the various national and regional assessments? The international community is not running up to fund us, guys. So the idea that we're going to be launching...
We have to come with something cheaper, because actually we don't have any guys, so we have to do it. And we can have, but actually it's not. I mean, I fully agree with you. The discussion is not about globalizing PISA, especially for the countries we have a concern because they are not measuring. Most countries in the planet are measuring something. Are measuring national assessment or joining regional assessment or joining international assessment. We really try to help for the countries who are not measuring anything. And actually, when the discussion is not globalizing PISA, especially for that level. PISA for development so far are 6 countries. We have problem with the stream C, that is the kids that are out of school. It's incredible costly. It's not that I'm against. It's a decision of the country. I wouldn't intrude on how they allocate their funding, but from the point of view of actually having a good national assessment system, I think that most of them are kind of having some kind of metric, and the obligation on our side is try to provide guidelines and to try to actually to come with a reasonable metrics, and I think that the discussion that is right now is effectively that. Regional assessment, for some reason, are cheaper. Some of them have incorporated already some capacity development like PASEC in terms of the work, and they have sat down already in a very creative way to try to come with some common items that so we could help us to link the assessment, and we're facilitating that work. And I think that is a way, and the regional assessment are really politically very important. The countries, and it's not to depress anybody about PISA, it's not a particular issue. Latin America is much more important when laboratory of UNESCO publishes the data. It's a huge issue. You don't want to see Argentina below Brazil or below Chile or below Peru. And this is a much more relevant issue for the work of the region than actually the PISA. So I think that there is a lot of political buy-in, and eventually in some other countries, the primary level is the level of education that many countries are seeing. So we have to take into account also how much money we are talking, and there is no money in this moment to actually to fund a globalization of PISA or any other of some of the international tests. We have to come with some other creative solution that is within our budgets.
So I think that this conversation is getting a little distorted. It's not about PISA in my mind. The PISA gives you a standard of what is the level of learning in a broad group of developed countries. We also have the regional tests, 2 in Africa, 1 in Latin America, and they give lots of information about how well Argentina is doing compared to Brazil. And in my mind, getting everybody to take PISA would be a mistake, because it turns out the PISA tests are too difficult for a large number of people in Latin America, and that's the middle income group. It's not your group here, and 90% of the students in Ghana today at age 15, PISA age, cannot solve a simple exchange rate problem of converting from one exchange rate to another. 90%. And so it doesn't help to give them these tests and say, yes, 90% can't answer all of these questions. But you could have linkages, as Silvia points out, very easily to link tierce to PISA or TIMSS levels, so that you know how far these countries might have to move. It's different than saying how you actually get countries to move, but having that information then provides goals for both the international community and for the national. That's the simple thing.
Coming together and agreeing to create a sense of belonging to a single, talk again about this crawl, walk, run. We need an under 5 mortality rate, good national capacity.
To make more difficult, to come with the indicator that is very difficult to interpret, so we can have with something that is actually completing the MDGs that I actually would defend, as Karen did exactly, in terms it has not been good for every child, but it put a lot of kids in the school, and we have to actually to measure how much they learn, and it seems that we have a global metric for that point of measurement, so I think that is actually a good solution, and we understand that it's not the perfect solution. I wouldn't try to convince anybody that we have a technical solution that is going to solve everybody's life and is going to have an immediate actually spillover, but I care more about having something to actually to guide actually to lead the effort of the countries, and this could be complemented with the effort that the countries do. In no case I am trying to annulate. I actually would like to try to take advantage of what the countries are doing and what the regional assessment are doing, and our obligation is just to discuss and to come with a concrete kind of agreement of what are the contents that every child for each of the points of measurement have agreed by the presidents need to know, and what are the minimum proficiency levels that they need to have, because this is what we have been asked to, and I think that this is our contribution in terms of the discussion.
I think one remark about MDG, since I'm the MDG representative on the other end of the spectrum here. We got lots of kids in school. On average, they didn't learn very much. We have that from elaborate evaluations of all of the conditional cash transfer programs. We have all of this. We also have few, if any, examples of taking a bad school and making it into a good school. So to the extent that you're putting people in a bad school, you are not helping them. You are getting your statistics up, but you are not helping them in the short or the long run. And that's why I think that having access is important, but access to quality schools, and if you ignore that, you can't say that the MDGs.
Thank you so much for on this first plenary debate. We obviously do not have a full consensus, but I think we had all sessions that will happen in the afternoon, but also picking up some of the points in the plenary debate as well. So thank you to the full conversation. All right. So now the hotel restaurant.
Okay, so we're going to break for lunch. The hotel restaurant can handle all of us if you'd like to stay, and if not, you can take the hotel van or your car. There are many restaurants within a mile radius of here. We'll be back for 1:30 for the next session.